For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Stalemate. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttners View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Are we facing a crisis in our democracy?
I think the situation is quite serious. There is an impasse in the sense that riot police have been called into the house, there have been disruptions, and there were supposed attempts to get an agreement between the ANC and other parties, and these have fallen through. But I think we need to sit back and ask ourselves exactly what is happening. Some people, I think, have a secret pleasure in the chaos that you see in the House. I must admit that when I first saw the filibustering, the flurry of motions, I thought, well, these people are using parliamentary procedures in order to delay the presentation of the report on Nkandla, and it was legitimate for them to do that. And it was, they got some initiative as minority parties. However, it's very important that when you engage in activities, a particular campaign or particular approach to Parliament, that you constantly evaluate what you're doing. Because what is successful today isn't necessarily successful if you repeat it for the rest of the year. You have to keep on evaluating what it is that you want to achieve and whether the methods that you are using contribute towards the achievement of that goal. Now, it's not clear to me what it is that the opposition parties wish to achieve through Parliament. The Nkandla report, it's clear now, the ANC has passed their version of a report on Nkandla, yes. And the next step, presumably, is to go to court. So there's not much more that you can do about that. Calling for the president to appear is, it seems to me, where the opposition parties have to ask themselves whether continuing with that is worth risking the type of disorder that may bring the riot police back. Now, if the riot police come back in, we can say that there are rules that allow it, but the ANC has done something damaging to democracy. But if you initiate activities ad infinitum, indefinitely, which will continually lead to the riot police coming in, you need to take responsibility for that and ask yourself whether that is actually helping to stabilize parliamentary democracy. And real leadership is leadership which evaluates continually what is being done and asks whether there should not be some flexibility in the approach that is adopted because the costs are so great. Even if we can say the ANC is to blame by not holding the president accountable, nevertheless other parties must take some responsibility.
And what do you think is the significance of the ANC using its majority to push through its decisions? Is it not an obstacle in the way of giving solutions?
You know, we need to understand, we need to put this on the table. Do people accept that in representative democracy, the party that wins the majority of votes becomes the ruling party, and it has the right to use its numbers to push through legislation or decisions, whether or not the rest of the parties agree. That is what it means. This is what liberals call, some liberals have called the tyranny of the majority. Now, I don't like that phrase because it's of the essence of democracy that decisions are made by the majority. The people of South Africa voted, and 62% voted for the ANC to be the government. So it has to be accepted that the ANC has the dominant power to rule in Parliament subject to the Constitution. So even though the ANC has a majority, it has to recognize that it must exercise its rule within the constraints of the Constitution. And the question that needs to be asked, or let's say the allegation that can be made and sustained, is that the ANC is not conducting its majority power in accordance with the Constitution by failing to hold the president accountable, and probably by the president failing to appear to answer questions. So that's on the one hand. Majority is not everything. Majority is the way in which people decide elections. Majority is also the way in which decisions are made in Parliament, subject to the Constitution. But in a multi-party democracy, there must be respect not only for the majority, but also for the rights of minority parties to pursue their roles in Parliament. They must be accorded some measure of respect, and when you simply ignore their right to put questions to the president, are you according them the rights that they're entitled to? When you run committees in a way that doesn't give a chance for a proper investigation of all the types of inputs that could be heard, are you actually respecting the rights of minority parties under the Constitution? So I don't think majority in itself is a problem. That's a principle of democracy, of representative democracy, and we have to accept that. And I think one of the problems is that underneath what's happening now is the minority parties are trying to achieve by other means what they can't achieve through parliamentary processes. For example, marching on Parliament and the disruptions. So it's important that one recognizes and accords respect to what it means to be the majority.
And how should the crisis in Parliament be addressed?
See, I think this is a time for leaders with vision. This is a time for leaders to think beyond their immediate short-term interests as parties. The establishment of parliamentary democracy in South Africa was historic and was important, and it is important that it is not endangered and that the current problems are overcome. And it means that every party to this problem needs to ask itself what it can do to end the impasse. I've indicated that it's important that we should not derive pleasure from chaos in Parliament, because chaos in Parliament cannot be a permanent state of affairs if Parliament is to be a debating chamber. So the opposition parties have to ask themselves that. The ANC has the majority, but it needs to ask itself whether it is exercising its majority powers within the context of constitutionalism. My guess is that they will not ask themselves these questions, and that we need to consider the involvement, or we need to have leaders from other sectors of societies, faith-based leaders, business leaders, and others, getting involved in resolving this problem so that our democracy is not endangered the way it is.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about remedying the current parliamentary stalemate. Thank you,
Thank you.
Professor.